here's the fun day. So I'm going to kind of cruise through a ton of stuff because it's all the stuff the textbook won't tell you. And some of it will even be whether or not we should listen to the textbook. Yeah, amen, right? So here's the big thing that we're going to look at. This is all the stuff that you tend not to learn in school, so now you get to learn it in school, right? I just like to call it the assorted topics because I was looking through your slides and looking back, because a lot of them were the same ones that I went through when I was going through a program, right? Like Dr. Triplett, who wrote the CSCS exam, was my college advisor. So I've seen a lot of the same slides. I've seen a lot of the people present. And so being able to understand, all right, science, application, let's blend the two. So biases, obviously, like I said, we start out with these all the time. I think that a lot of research gets put out based on poor population sizes. Let's be real. Research tends to go towards untrained individuals, and a lot of times it's these college-age males who are doing it for a free pizza voucher, right? Like, oh, I get a free pizza a week to come do this exercise study. Great. And they come and do it, right? So that's a little bit of a bias for me, because I think a lot of times when we look at research, it's geared toward a lot of untrained individuals in these really small subsets of the population. I also think a lot of people still live in the Stone Age, and so a lot of times we get hooked on specific one little sample studies, or we get on these single topics. I'll talk a little bit about knees over toes at some point. I think probably when we talk about the Olympic lifts and just the velocity-based training. Bro science, you'll hear that term thrown around jokingly, my friends, because I generally go straight from here to the gym afterwards, and I show up wearing real clothes, and they just jokingly call me the brofessor, right? So it's one of those things where bro science, what is bro science? Guys in the gym tend to do stuff a bit differently. Sometimes science backs it up later. I've found that to be true with a lot of things that are in practice, and I think there's this blend that can happen. So, and then my bias also, I don't like certain metrics of performance. So here's what we're going to talk about. I use the term 1RM or NA because this is one of my weightlifters. In the sport of weightlifting, there tends to be this social media joke of a power or NA, right? So basically whenever they do like a clean or a snatch, if you catch it above parallel, it's, a power snatch or a power clean versus below parallel, it's a clean or a snatch. The joke is power or NA. So we're going to talk about 1 rep max or NA. Do we really need to test a 1 rep max? Do we really need to Olympic lift, right? Because every textbook is like Olympic lifts are the best for power. And then do we really need to pay attention to every single research study and every single little like textbook graph that we see? So let's start with the 1 rep max, right? 1 rep maxes are really simple. They're really, really easy to track. Force is force, right? If we test a 1 rep max, we know what somebody's absolute amount of force that they can produce is. It's trackable. It's very simple to track over time. If you have a weight room, this is probably one of your best testing metrics when you're looking at strength phases, right? And you can progress it. We can base things, right? When we look back at our periodization that we did, last Monday, we can sit there and plan out specific percentages and progress that strength and that force output over time. But 1 rep maxes come with a little bit of risk reward, right? This is a buddy of mine, that's Wes. Wes is my size. Actually, he's about 10 pounds lighter than I am. I took that photo when he was doing a set of like 6 to 8 reps. That's 75, 85, 90. So that's 495 on the bar right there, right? Or 490 it might be when it actually adds up. Reps, right? Very, very specific skill set though, right? If I ask, and this is a guy that's been doing this for years, right? Well, if I ask just random Joe Blow to come off the street and test a 1 rep max, right? There's a skill component to what he does, right? Because and I've done it before, right? We're going to talk about the gym aware and the velocity-based training here in a second. I've hooked that thing up to him, and 135 pounds moves the exact same speed as 550 pounds. I think 535, whatever it was that we tested. I know I've seen him squat up to 560, right? But there's a risk reward that, yeah, right? Like, you're like, holy smokes, like there's people out there that do this stuff? Yeah, right? 1 rep max is a skill, right? He's very skilled at this. So for him, 1 rep max makes sense. He can plan and track over time, right? Other things we got to consider is that fluctuates based over time, right? And we're going to talk about it here in a second with the alternatives. But if you're super fatigued, 1 rep max on Monday, if you come out of the weekend and you've just ate like crap and you stayed up till 2 in the morning on Saturday night partying with your friends, and then Sunday night you just procrastinated on all your work and you had a bunch of assignments you had to turn in on LMS, you're like wiping your face, you're like, yeah, right? Maybe you played a game and you have to come into the weight room the next day. 1 rep max is no longer 1 rep max, because whatever you hit on day 1, right, may not be what you hit that day. May not be what you're capable of. And so then you start to toy around with your adaptations, all right? So is it really the best predictor? When we look at alternatives, all right, there's a couple main ones that I think are very effective, all right? So reps in reserve or RPE, right? So when you've done the VO2 max testing, RPE, you've kind of seen that, right? Very, very similar. When you look at especially weight room stuff, RPE and reps in reserve is very, very useful, okay? So we go back to the previous slide in Wes, right? Everything he does is based off of RPE, and 10 is a max. 10 is a 1 rep max. I can't do any more reps and I can't do any more weight. 9 is like, well, I might have like 5 pounds left in the tank, right? Or maybe I have 1 rep left in the tank, right? Reps in reserve. So it helps you auto-regulate, because you may come in one day and you might do a rep of whatever movement it is. It could be a bicep curl, it could be, a squat, it could be a deadlift, it could be a bench press, it could be a power clean. You'd be like, I don't have this there today. Like, I feel like garbage, and I need to, in order to get the right adaptation, I need to take it a step back a little bit, okay? So you have RPE, reps in reserve, they're pretty much the same, right? A lot of people use them interchangeably. 3 rep max, less total load, right? So we have less total load on a bar or dumbbell, whatever it is, less technical, right? Because now all of a sudden we don't have to deal with the skill of doing a max output, all right? A little bit in terms of like overall safety, some people debate it a little bit, right? Because now all of a sudden we're asking you to produce force under fatigue from rep 1 and rep 2. Is rep 3 really the safest thing? Okay? But a lot of times people tend to like this a little bit better, because we can just go up to sets of 3, and at some point we can use that 3 rep max to predict a 1 rep max, and it's going to allow you to be a little bit more accurate across an entire training program, right? And then we get to velocity-based training, right? So that's what you see right there. That's what that thing is there here in a second, all right? But velocity allows you to target specific adaptations, and everything gets auto-regulated by bar speed. So that's what we're looking at, right? So if we were to do a 3 rep max, this is the pre-Leppens chart down here on the bottom, right? It basically breaks down optimal sets and rep ranges, volumes, and things like that for training. But if we know that we can hit a 3 rep max, we know that we're at 80-90%. So we can predict pretty closely what a 1 rep max is going to be, right? For untrained individuals, all right, who don't really have a skill of maxing out, they've never really been in to a weight room environment, 3 reps tends to be about 85%, right? And sometimes even 90%. More trained individuals, it tends to be 80 to 85%, okay? But that 3 rep max, then all of a sudden we say, okay, 80 to 90%, I might get 2 to 4 reps in there, okay? Now, velocity-based training, this thing might have just kicked off on me for a second, but that's okay. So this is the All-Spark, right? If anybody knows Transformer reference. So this is what we call gym aware. When I got laid off from the speed school, I manipulated this into the negotiation that I would get laid off a month earlier on paper and would still work in exchange for this thing, because this thing's $2,500. This one little box. But, right, and we're going to get this thing zeroed back out, right? So I can test everything I want with just this, right? So you see that top chart up there. You can't see it here because it's super zoomed out, but there's adaptations and velocities that have been researched and correlated across all of like athletes. There are thousands of data points on these, and we can kind of target specific adaptations, right? So if I attach this to a bar, all right, this little tether gets put on. Well, the moment this moves, all of a sudden you start to see a number pop up. So I turn the auto record off. There we go, right? So all of a sudden I have a rep, right? Well, that last rep moved at 2.23 meters a second, right? I pull it up, pull it back down, see what that last one registered at. It might have gone too slow. Oh, nope, there it goes, right? What was that last one? We get 1.05, right? So I can start to track that. Certain versions, right, 0.95. Let's just say I want to test something a little bit differently. I can test, and we're going to go here, stop recording, right? Come on. I can test a lot of different things with these, right? Because you can base your programming off of certain metrics, all right? I could test peak velocity. I could test peak power outputs, right? So when we're in a power phase of training and trying to develop power, I can base things off that, right? I could put loads in here, however. Obviously, not everybody's got $2,500, right? I didn't. I traded a month of work for it, right? One of the things we look at when we're looking at that as well, you tend to be able to see it, right? Fast is fast. It's pretty identifiable as to whether or not somebody's moving fast, all right? But something like that, a tool like that, allows us to target specific adaptations without ever having to test a 1 rep max, ever. Which is pretty nice. Like I said, that one's a bit more expensive. You have other variations, like that one you have to have an iPad and you can mount it to racks and everything like that, and there's like a cloud it'll sync to if I really wanted to pay the $1,000 a year to sync it all. There's other ways you can do it. A lot of systems right now cost about $300 a piece, right? And they just hook up straight to your phone. So, but it tends to be a pretty useful thing, all right? So when we look at a lot of testing metrics, when we look at some of the things your textbook might say with 1 rep maxes, know that there is other ways that you can test it, right? There's not a one-size-fits-all solution. There is a lot of ways that we can target specific adaptations for whatever phase we're in, right? If we're targeting power, right? If you're using a conjugate method and trying to do a dynamic day where you're kind of moving fast and developing the quality of speed strength or strength speed, we can predict all of those things based off of velocity and how fast bars move, right? Which becomes a very useful tool. We were talking on Monday, right? Move slow, get slow. Move fast, get fast, right? We can target specific adaptations. I'm still even learning how to use this, right? This was introduced to me 3 years ago. I never learned anything about this in school. I had to figure all this out. Using that chart, somebody challenged me to basically enter a powerlifting meet, so squat, bench, deadlift, because that's not a type of strength meet I've ever competed in. And using that chart and all the adaptations that were based off of velocity, between the squat, bench, and deadlift added 130 pounds to the total combined weight that I could have done in 10 weeks. It's a lot of force output to put in 10 weeks, right? And there's a lot of things like I could set targets on that stuff and say, I want you to move this speed. If it doesn't move this speed, you can regulate volume and stuff off it. You can get really in depth with it, but it's a tool that allows you to get into specific adaptations, right? So there's your 1 rep max or not, right? Olympic lift or not. Everybody really likes to get married to power cleans and power snatches and all the different things, right? And I'm going to show you a video of each thing in case you're not familiar with the Olympic lifts, but basically there's 3 of them, right? The snatch, the clean, and the jerk. Those are the 3 Olympic lifts. In a competition, the snatch is performed 3 times, you get to however heavy you can get. The clean and jerk as a combined thing get added together, right? The nice thing about snatch, the snatch is a very fast movement. Peak velocity moves about 2 meters a second or maybe higher, okay? Depending on a couple different things, because some people are very fast under the bar, which you'll see here in a second. Some people are very fast extending with the bar. Clean moves a little bit slower, right? And so I kind of broke down these, right? So the snatch really works more for speed strength. So moving sub-maximal loads very, very quickly. The clean, a little bit more strength speed, okay? Same thing, peak velocity is about 1.5 meters a second, all right? The problem, the jerk is tricky because there's a bunch of different components that go into this because it doesn't actually move that far, and you'll see that here in a second with a video. They're all very complex, right? And so if you don't know how to do it, or if you don't know how to teach it, do we really need to put it in a program? Because when we really look at it, these are the Olympic lifts, right? So you have a snatch. Bar goes from floor to overhead, right? You can see though, it's a very fast movement, okay? So bar goes from the floor, body pulls under it, stands up. If I were to catch that above parallel, that'd be a power snatch, right? But you're typically not gonna have as high loads. The power clean or the clean, right? So if you've done front squats, it's basically a deadlift into a front squat. Like I said, 1.5 meters a second on average, but it depends on how much, like how fast you can move under the bar and whatnot, right? If you watched that video and saw that bar kind of crash on her shoulders, yeah, that's one of my weightlifters, right? So if you were watching the video of her moving the other day, like when I had her hooked up to that, I showed a couple of people before Monday's class, like what that looks like, right? That's a 155-pound individual, and that was 215 pounds that she just picked up off the floor, right? So, but if you notice the crashing, she's very good extending. She's very slow under the bar. So her max velocity in the concentric portion of the clean, very, very quick. But her ability to get under the bar, she gets mistimed. Bar crashed on her shoulders, leaves like these weird little hickeys. You can kind of see like one on my neck right now, okay? And then the jerk, right? So pushing the bar overhead as fast as you can, right? Like I said, this one's actually probably the most complex, at least in my opinion. This is the most complex out of all the Olympic lifts because it is very based on timing, your ability to deal with a lot of discomfort because it sits in your throat and you can't breathe. So when we look at the Olympic lifts, those are your main 3. Do we really need to do them, right? It takes a little bit of time to teach, especially if you're not proficient in them. Learning how to teach them takes a little bit of time. The timing in the timing becomes a safety issue, right? We're dealing with high forces, high velocities, and technicality, right? This is my big gripe with CrossFit. So if you've been to a CrossFit gym and you've seen people slinging around 135-pound power cleans, rep after rep after rep after rep, we stop the ability to produce power overall, right? And a lot of people will sacrifice technique for it, okay? So when we look at the Olympic lifts, implementing in the program, you've got to consider the safety issue, right? Trap bar deadlifts and trap bar jumps, right? So this is just a clean pull variation, so it's a partial clean, right? Still develops a high amount of peak velocity. Do we really need to do the full clean? Nope. That develops a lot of power, all right? Trap bar jump, it's kind of hard to see up here on the screen. Same thing, we had the GymAware hooked up to the end of a trap bar. It's 95 pounds. Guy was jumping, right? The higher you get, it starts to allow you to develop similar qualities without doing the actual Olympic lifts, far less technical, right? And I'm gonna show you here a video in a second because I've done some of the testing on some of these things. Sprinting and plyometrics, also power movements, they're very fast, right? If you run 100 meters in 11 seconds, you're covering 9 meters a second. Olympic lifts may produce, so say you snatch and you do 2.25 meters a second as a peak velocity, which is faster? 9 meters a second, 2.25 meters a second, right? Like a kindergartner could figure that one out. Being able to move fast, fast is fast. Do we really need to Olympic lift when we can max effort sprint and do some plyos, right? Show you a video here real quick on the next slide. So what you're seeing on the left here that's about to play, this is a trap bar jump, testing the velocity. So what you're gonna see, these two movements are the exact same weight, right? Literally jumping, all right? When I tested that, and I had to go dig around for all this data a little bit just because I wanted to see it, moved about 1.6 meters a second, okay? Power clean, same thing, right? Same weight, moving 1.7 meters a second at a peak velocity. Pretty close, right? So all of a sudden we look at it and say, well, if you look at the positioning, they look pretty similar from the starting point, right? Not everything is going to be one size fits all. So if you get to this point where people say, we need to power clean, do we? They're pretty same force velocity profiles. So we can still target adaptations with far less complexity, okay? So there's your little thing on the Olympic lifts. Textbook or nah? This is one of my favorites, right? So when we look at textbook issues, right? What is bro science? There's a lot of stuff that gets done in gyms everywhere that scientists kind of look at and say, that's stupid. But when we look at bro science, a lot of it's educated guesses based off what we already know, okay? There are things that are backed up by science that you can do in the gym, but you're drawing from multiple things, right? So a lot of times when we look at different protocols that are used in the gym, bro science kind of helps us out a little bit, right? It's more like educated guessing. Science informs, but it's not perfect, right? Like I said, going right back to why I have the bias of the fact that it's like, science is great, research is great, but it's very small subsets of the population, right? What's great for you as a soccer player, and studies that say, hey, this is great for soccer, should probably be done on soccer players, right? Does it make sense for them to say, hey, we need to do this for soccer players based on this study on 50-year-old ladies doing plyometrics? No, doesn't make sense, right? It's not the same population. But it does give us, science gives us a baseline knowledge. The textbook, and we're gonna get into this later, the textbook gives you your baseline knowledge. But how we apply it, gotta get a little broy. Everybody knows Arnold, right? Arnold did a lot of things that science was like, this dude is off his rocker. But there's a reason why Arnold had probably one of the greatest physical developments out of any bodybuilder in the world, right? Some of the things that bro science kind of figured out before science backed it up, right? These guys made observations based off of what they were doing in the gym, and like, hey, you know what? The more I think about the muscle that I'm trying to work, the stronger it gets and the bigger it gets, right? The mind-muscle connection. They literally were like, I can lift less weight, and if I really focus on my biceps, if I really focus on my chest contracting, then it got stronger and it got bigger, right? Arnold was notorious for stuff like this. The reason why people say Arnold was the greatest bodybuilder of all time is because he was so symmetrical, because he literally measured everything. That was science, right? It's bro science. He's going to measure his biceps to make sure they're the exact same size, right? And I think somebody at one point, I can't remember like how close they said back in his heyday, they were like within 1/4 of an inch in size to each other, right? It's pretty symmetrical for the body, right? Time under tension, right? The more tension we put the muscle under, the stronger it gets, the more hypertrophied it gets, all right? The more muscle fibers we can recruit. These things were done in the gym, and then science backed it up later. Same thing with velocity-based training. We knew fast was fast, right? All of a sudden, guys were like sitting there, it's like, well, if I move 405 pounds on a squat really, really slow versus moving 315 and the weights start clanging around because I'm moving it so fast and almost pops off my shoulders, well, all of a sudden we know it's like, people are like, okay, well, what's going on? Science came back and explained it, right? We had the inferences. These guys took what they were seeing and made their own inferences, and then science backed it up later. But there's a lot of stuff that science then kind of also proved wrong, right? Anybody ever heard that creatine crystallizes in your kidneys? It's bull crap. Science corrected that one, right? A lot of stuff that bros do also isn't backed up by science, right? So training to failure leads to the most muscle growth, right? Also leads to the most fatigue and long-term decrease in performance, right? Might be great for bodybuilders to do, but for athletes, training to failure might be one of those things that we want to avoid. That's what science started to figure out. All of a sudden, they looked at nervous system activity, looked at soreness, looked at injury rates, right? The ability to collect data then told us, hey, this way that we've been training wasn't right, and it's doing more harm than good, all right? Like people say creatine's dangerous. Science came in, and I use creatine as the example because it's the most researched supplement out there. Everybody's like, creatine's bad for you. Bull crap. Science has proven that wrong like 100 different times, okay? They research creatine more than they research whey protein, all right? And where do you go to the grocery store? What do you see on the shelves everywhere? Whey protein, all right? Yeah, improvements in fascial training, right? So, you know, the more science really dives in, the more anatomy professors and people like do autopsies on the body, we're starting to learn way more about the fascia that's surrounding your body, right? How it all works together, how it's all innervated with each other. There are people that literally base all of their training models off of what fascia does and how it correlates with each other and works as a system to produce motion, okay? Oh, that's that thing turned off. I got really confused, like what's the beeping, right? So how do we really apply everything? Our great box of basics. So before I kind of go on this line of thought, I didn't come up with this concept, at least, or this way of explaining it, right? One of the things we look at when we're looking at everything we do, right? We have a box. Everything you do fits into this box of basics. It's your physiology and anatomy knowledge. It's your knowledge of nutrition. It's your knowledge of testing protocols, sets and reps, and what those sets and reps do. Plyometrics, exercises, biomechanics, rest intervals. All that fits into your box. Everything we know about training, everything you learn throughout all your coursework in college, it's your box, right? Because when you sit there, if I look at Cole and I'm like, all right, how do I make Cole better? I reach into my box, I pull out my knowledge, right? Like I said, textbook informs, science informs us, right? But because it's done in specific settings with specific protocols, it doesn't always tell us exactly what to do. We have a box of basics, and you get to pull from it. You make your inferences, right? That's science. Everything we've talked about over the last 2 weeks, week and a half, all goes back to this box of basics, right? So it all fits in there. How do we think outside the box, right? Because if we know everything that's in the box, the really cool thing is that we get to experiment. We get our new exercises, right? We get to explore some different potential and opportunities, right? We use that information to say, hey, Cole sucks at squatting. How can I make him better at squatting, right? Well, it might be to not squat, right? Because then all of a sudden we look at Cole and say, hey, you know what? His biomechanical levers just don't. So new exercises, new protocols, different sets and rep schemes. We get to create this stuff based off of what's in the box, okay? Creative patterns, right? Getting outside the standard squat, bench, deadlift, power clean, right? We can move beyond that, right? We use what's in our box to understand how the body works, right? We collect data on what we do with people. We can get more creative with the patterns that we move in and how we program. And then we get to expand the horizon, okay? Now, I'm gonna touch on here now after this, right? Any questions on any of that stuff before I go into like the final thing? No. So we had this conversation last week. I can make you better at anything I want if you believe me. The final aspect of putting all this together is buy-in. It's communication, right? So in terms of exercise science and coaching, personal training, whatever, there isn't anybody that I've met or encountered that's done more work on it than this guy, right? So this is your person you should know. This is Brett Bartholomew. He wrote a book called Conscious Coaching, basically breaking down if there's one skill you really need, right? We can have all of our baseline knowledge and our ability to apply it, and the success we apply it in is going to be limited to how well we communicate, right? They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? So if I have a crap relationship with you, you're not going to listen to me. It's just like no matter how many times I like sit there and like try to beat you in the head with like whatever information I'm going through, right? You're not going to listen to me, okay? Being able to communicate is part of science. This is part of your exercise science, right? Because if you can't communicate what you know, nobody's going to listen to you and you're not going to get any results, right? Being able to relate, all right? That's one of the final aspects. If we're going to apply, learn how to communicate, right? Read the room. Try to understand body language, okay? That's part of your exercise science. Because the body and the mind get tied together. So the more that we can work on the communication aspect, the more that you can get results out of people, okay? Resources for expanding your learning. So I got 3 slides of this, okay? Like I said, everything you learn in your coursework goes into this box, right? And how do you learn to take what's in the box and apply it? Read, listen, watch, ask questions, right? In terms of being able to understand information, and like I said, you're going to have access to all these slides that tend to do a really, really good job at this, right? So Simply Faster is a sprint-based and strength and performance-based company. Like they do blogs, they sell products, right? That GymAware came from simplyfaster.com, right? The guys over there basically find the brightest minds that they can and have those people write about what they do, how they apply it. So a lot of my ability to understand velocity-based training came from reading people's stuff on that website, right? Just Fly Sports, sprinting, throwing, track, right? Joel, who runs Just Fly Sports, does a lot of stuff with Carl, who runs Simply Faster. They literally have like a joined podcast called Just Fly Sports, right? They find the people that know a lot about specific things, and they make it really simple to understand, right? Mash Elite Performance. So this is actually a guy who's out in Hickory, and I've been fortunate enough to talk a lot with his assistant coach. And if you want to see what some of in terms of like learning the Olympic lifts, how to apply that in a sport setting, and then also just really understanding how to apply a ton of different principles into things that make sense. Travis Mash is probably one of the brightest meatheads that you'll probably find out there, right? And he sounds, because he's from like West Jefferson, right? He's got this thick Southern accent, all right? But Travis is brilliant in the way that he applies it, right? I went and did this shoulder assessment with one of his weightlifters, right? A 17-year-old kid that at 16 became the youngest American to put 400 pounds over his head. And he's my size, at 17, right? Like what the heck? A freakishly strong kid, right? Left side barbell, we talked about all the conjugate method when we talked about periodization, right? They put most of their info online for free. They just have a blog, right? You can go through exercises that they use, ways that they periodize things, right? They put it all out there. They put as much out as for free. Examine.com, right? Let's be real. Nobody do you like reading research papers? She's like, no. Sometimes, right? The folks at examine.com went through and have if there's a topic, they've found as many studies as they can and then basically synthesize all that information to come up and synthesize all the conclusions for you, right? Like if you go to examine.com and type in creatine, it's going to pull up 15 different articles that they've written and synthesize information from all the studies on creatine and how to apply it, okay? Strengthcoach.com/public, because theirs is a paid site. If you want to pay $1 a month for it, it has a high amount of value because they've got forums and you can talk with people as much as you want. But there's a ton of articles that Mike Boyle, so we talked about Mike, where we talked about the unilateral training and bilateral deficits last Wednesday. That's his site, and he's tried to, again, bring together as many minds as possible. If you want to upload, like we were talking on Monday about the track program that we're on, and if I uploaded that program into the coaches forum, they literally have like a thread that's like analyze my program. You could stick it in there and there'll be coaches that will tear it to shreds and pick it to pieces so you can make it better, right? Because they'll look at what you're doing on paper and say, this doesn't make sense on paper, and they'll ask the questions that will refine your thought process. I like podcasts. I don't really know that I've really listened to music in the last 3 years. That's probably why I'm kind of a little crazy. Just Fly Sports, right? Like I said, that's the sponsored by Simply Faster, but it's Joel who runs justflysports.com. All right. Tons of really technical information. There's no like random banter. It's like if you want to learn stuff, Joel's got you. You like a little bit of banter, Barbell Shrugged has probably been one of the most popular fitness podcasts out there, and they do a really, really good job at introducing you to people to find who can then expand your knowledge, right? So they literally just go after as many professionals. They started as a CrossFit podcast and realized that they could offer a lot more. Anywhere from Joe DeSena, who runs Spartan Race, to Dr. Cal Dietz, or not, I don't think Cal Dietz is a PhD, but they talked to Cal Dietz. They've talked to guys that have won Mr. Olympia in bodybuilding. They've talked to ultra marathon runners. They went down to Jamaica and talked to, it wasn't Bolt, one of the other guys that's down there. Yeah, Johan, right? Like the guy that runs Barbell Shrugged, there's a video of him racing Johan Blake with a 40-meter head start, and he still lost. Yeah, right, because he's Johan, right? Power Athlete Radio, these guys do a really good job at, same thing, a little bit more banter, kind of more funny, I guess, but they do a really good job at bringing in professionals and a really long-form conversation to extract information, all right? Art of Coaching, that's Brett Bartholomew's podcast. He will find anybody in any profession that's good at communicating and talk to him, right? Like I listened to an episode yesterday. It was some lady who runs a website called index.com, and she basically talked, how do you synthesize complex topics into like an index card? How do you create that visual display of what you know, right? So if you like podcasts, those are the few that I recommend, okay? Other resources, 10 books I suggest every coach read, right? So Becoming a Supple Leopard was really the first book on mobility that really hit the shelf and was mainstream. A lot of people just go through it for the pictures and all the mobility exercises. But if you actually read into the book and actually read what Dr. Kelly Starrett talks about, because he's a physical therapist that has his hand in the strength and performance and fitness world, makes a ton of sense and really synthesizes down anatomy and a little bit of biomechanics into understanding how everything works, and then gives you strategies to improve those things. Periodization training for sports, when we looked at all the linear periodization, right? It's a textbook, but it does a pretty good job at the application. Triphasic training, Cal Dietz. That thing's an ebook. I think you can get it for like $25. It's like 120 pages. Same thing. Cal's a practical applicator, right? So when you read his stuff, he comes at it from almost the bro science thing. He said, this is what science told me, and I applied it, and I collected all my own data on this stuff, and this is what we came up with, right? Advances in functional training, Mike Boyle. That's the second edition, right? So when it comes up as advances in functional training. He talks about the ethos and why he chose the bilateral deficit. Even some of his mobility work and how what he calls the joint by joint approach, how to program to create fully functioning humans. Okay. Weightlifting Programming Winning Coaches Guide. Bob Takano is one of the people that you won't ever really hear about. He lives in the Olympic weightlifting world. But when we look at a lot of Russian sports science, Bob was a biology teacher who taught weightlifting in high schools. And he basically looked at how do I synthesize all this Russian training manual knowledge and how do we apply it? Right? Obviously, he does it for the sport of weightlifting, but there's segments on long-term athletic development. How do we acquire skills? How do we cause adaptations? What does it really mean to cause adaptations to the body? So that one's really good. That one's also pretty simple and not a hard read. Okay. The next four are kind of my favorite little go-tos. The Sports Gene, David Epstein, and Range by David Epstein. They're technically two separate books. Genetics in sports, high responders, low responders. What really makes good athletes, right? Because there are certain characteristics that lend themselves to specific sports. And it's not necessarily that, somebody's genetically gifted, perhaps. Maybe it's the way that they were raised, right? He tackles that discussion. Range tackles sport specificity and the ability to create general fitness or general skills in order to raise a system. And he kind of breaks that down from a ton of different aspects. Conscious coaching, right? I wish I had my copy, but I had an intern that I worked with who needed a little help on his communicating skills. So I gave him my copy. That's one of those books, like I said, pretty easy read, really very well written, and breaks down the information really well. Man's Search for Meaning. I know it sounds like a weird book to throw in. Why would I throw in a book from a guy that went through Auschwitz? I know, yeah. You kind of laugh. You're like, what? I don't get it, right? But here's the thing, right? When we look at conscious coaching, know yourself, right? Viktor Frankl breaks down human psychology, the ability to find purpose, meaning in what you do, right? Because coaching, personal training, even just professional life, finding some purpose for what you do is going to enhance your ability to then communicate and then get results out of people. If you can understand how people act, how they react when they're under stress, why they do what they do, how they find meaning in what they do, because then if you can connect with them on that, that's going to impact how you communicate, right? Let's be real. If I came in here and was just sitting here reading off of slides, right? You'd probably sit there and be like, this guy doesn't care, right? Obviously, you can probably sense some kind of passion because I freaking live for this. This is what I love, right? Back to the training books. Super Training, Mel Siff and Yuri Vergashansky. Again, breaking down the Russian training concepts. That book's a little bit harder to come by because there's very limited copies out there. So, and more copies kind of pop up. I looked for it last night. I think there's 3 copies left on Amazon. When I looked 6 months ago, there was 1 copy there. So it's one of those that kind of ebbs and flows in its availability. But that breaks down tons of good information on training and different training methods that the Soviets used, that the Germans used, that really all the original sports science that got done. Obviously, the West Side Barbell Book of Methods, That's all of Louis' blog posts condensed into a really easy format. And he breaks down the how and why of what they do, and what they do as a whole, okay? Let's be real, social media. Everybody's got an Instagram, yeah? Yeah, you're like, oh, right? I use social media a lot because I'm only like 5 years older than you guys. So these are people that I've found do a really good job at taking it makes sense. Max Schmarzo, obviously his handle's Strong by Science, breaks down the science of things. This is a guy that's an athletic trainer. He's got a master's in exercise science and works with athletes as a strength coach. So he comes from a rehab background, knows his stuff, and he looks at how do you apply it, right? He does this very, very practically. He also pairs up with a guy named Vernon Griffith, right? So Vernon was the one who kind of came up with your knowledge is the box concept, right? Vernon does a really good job at educating people on mobility and movement. He comes from a military background and works with, at least from what he said when I heard him speak in person, works with a lot of vets who have a lot of different injuries. So they have to work around what happens. Like, we can't do this because this person's missing a limb, right? Brad Schoenfeld is probably one of the leading researchers and presenters in the world on hypertrophy and muscle gain. So when we talked about like the mind-muscle connection and bros figured that out first, he was the guy that went back and figured out why that happens. Same thing with time under tension, things like that. Dr. Schoenfeld does a really great job. I think he teaches at New York University. I think he's at NYU, somewhere in New York. I can't remember. Squat University, biomechanics, physical therapy, learning how to teach movement. He doesn't just do squats, right? But really learning what does it take to build better moving humans, right? Some people don't like his stuff because he gets into super niches and, right? But as a net whole, he does a really good job of making things simpler, okay? Chris Duffin, AKA the mad scientist. Chris is one of those people that does a lot of really freaky physical feats, but then he puts out a lot of information on how he accomplishes those. So that was the first guy to ever squat 1,000 pounds for more than 3 reps without any like special squat suits or anything. He just had a belt and some knee wraps and stuff. He did that as a fundraiser for, I can't remember what childhood cancer, right? He did that right at the beginning of the shutdown, right? But he talks about how do we keep the spine safe? How do we improve mobility? How do we do all these things to increase our max force output? He was behind one of the original velocity trackers called the Open Barbell, and worked with a scientist on that to develop stuff. Joey Burgles just shows all the stuff that he does and gives an explanation as to why they do it. But Joey does a fantastic job of what it looks like to train across a wide spectrum of ability and for optimal human performance. Same thing with Alan Bishop. He's the strength coach for Houston men's basketball, right? So if you basketball folks, I think only one of you is here, but how do you apply different things and why, the logistics behind how you implement stuff. Obviously, Mike Boyle likes to go on little rants, like minute rants on Instagram. It's kind of funny. He just sits in his car and just films them. Craig Edwards, same thing. He's in, I think, University of New Hampshire or something like that. He actually was one of Boyle's interns. So Craig does a lot of stuff, same thing, publishes what he does and explains why. Darian Barr, he's one of those guys that's kind of coming out of the woodworks, basically rethinking why sprinting works the way it works and perhaps even why some of it's wrong, right? He was the one that, when I talked about sprinting in plyo, Christian Coleman is one of the best 60-meter runners in the world. Darian broke down probably one of the easiest ways that it is to understand how he did it. Joel Smith works a lot with Darian Barr. Same thing, runs all the info that he can as to why. He's written books on specific adaptations, particularly speed, strength, and then tendon health. Dr. Andy Galpin, I know you know Dr. Galpin because you guys worked together kind of in the same department at Berkeley. That's probably one of the leading muscle researchers in the world that actually applies stuff outside. So he does his own stuff. He works a lot of MMA fighters, weightlifters, powerlifters. When we look at like muscle fiber typing and changing muscle fiber adaptations, he does these things called muscle biopsies that he basically will take a piece of your quad for science and then analyze it. So he looked at the effects basically of long-term power training on the body. He basically found that females, and because that was a specific subset, he went to the World Weightlifting Championships and recruited like 100 females from the World Weightlifting Championships because they were in Disney to come up to his lab and let them take muscle fiber biopsies out of all of them, and figured out that the long-term effects of these girls who were training, 10 years plus in the sport of weightlifting had so many fast twitch muscle fibers and even almost like a weird super fast twitch muscle fiber. So some of his stuff and the way that he breaks it down, very, very interesting. And then obviously Brett, I know I threw his name in here a lot today because the communication aspect is huge. I've had the opportunity to talk to him and watch him present, and it's super, super weird because he literally will sit there and present to a room of 500 people and you feel like he's talking directly at you, right? He does a really good job at breaking down the communication aspect and asking the questions that get you to think about how you communicate. So those are people to follow, right? Books, podcasts, things to listen to, blogs you can read, people to follow, right? Your resources. Obviously, if you have questions, ask me, right? I'm more than happy to at least point you in some direction. My email's right there. I try to put stuff on a blog. That's the blog name. You can read it. You don't have to, right? It's also where I put all my business stuff because